Hey everybody, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Durling. I have a very special guest just passing through, my good friend Chad.
Hello.
He's back. Chad, it's been a while.
It has been.
You've been on the episodes before, and it's really, really good timing that I was going to do this episode anyway, because this is a band that this is a band and a time period in this band's history that we have a lot of history with. In a way, we'll get into all that, but we're basically the ultimate thing we're talking about here is 30th anniversary edition of Van Halen's Balance. We'll show that off later. This was fourth album they did with Sammy Hagar. It came out in January of 1995, and it was the final album they did with Sammy. And so we're going to talk about the album. We also had the privilege later that year in August, as a matter of fact, of seeing the band on the Balance tour, which, you know, turned out to be the last time in a while for that lineup. And yeah, we're just gonna basically dig into all things Balance. So I guess I'll start. So Chad, what was when this first came out? What was your initial, like, when did you first hear about the album? Do you remember hearing a particular song?
Well, so no, not exactly. I remember you introduced it to me. And so this was a kind of a different time period for us. We had already graduated high school and gone off to do other things.
Yeah.
So we were busier and less focused, or I was less focused on releases and so on in the music world. I was busy doing other things, college, etc. And I remember Tim giving me a call and asking me if he's, I think he probably started off by saying, hey, there's a new Van Halen album out, they're touring, do you want to try to catch them? And I remember thinking, well, gee, I had things going on. And
that was actually a little bit later.
It may have been a little bit later, but I remember thinking like, well, I hadn't listened to the album yet. So I'm like,
He was hemming and hawing, and that's when I knew I had to go to work.
Which I was hesitant, but it's just because I had things going on. It was expensive at the time. I also had never been to a rock concert before. I know that sounds hard to believe. I was, I don't know how old I was, 20-ish?
You'd have been 20.
20?
Yeah, almost 21. Yeah.
Growing up in a small town in an area that didn't get a lot of concerts, I had never been to I didn't know what I could potentially be about to miss. Anyways, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, that's something I'd forgotten about. I'd only just, like, 2 years previous, started to see a few shows. Because, we grew up together in the same small town, same area. And, there just wasn't... And Van Halen never came around to the eastern, seaport. And so to find out, they ended up playing in Old Orchard Beach, Maine, which is, the neighboring state to province of New Brunswick, where we live. But yeah, I remember distinctly seeing the video for "Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do" on Much Music, and it's a very dark song for them. It was, and the video is very dark too.
It is,
and so that's how I knew that they had a new album coming out. And I was working in radio at the time, so I knew that the single was out. It was on a sampler, so I was still, whether I wanted to or not, I was still aware of new music that was coming out. But I definitely wanted to make sure. Did you know Van Halen had a new album coming out?
Well, so I was familiar with all the prior albums and I loved them all, thoroughly loved them all. And I remember listening to this for the first time with Tim, because he had purchased the album, etc., and I hadn't yet. And it did sound different. It just does have a different tone. It is a little darker. There's a lot of things, and there were a couple of songs on there that I liked instantly, but the other ones took a little time to grow on me, and I love it. It's one of my favorite Van Halen albums now. So
it's interesting too, because like Chad said, we were young adults. It was time to get serious about the world, and this album was a more serious album. I mean, yes, there were some songs on it that were, I'm not even going to say more lighthearted, but lyrically were not all that serious, like Amsterdam. And but even a song like Big Fat Money, which sounds like sort of a throwaway jam in the studio song, lyrically it's actually quite cynical. So Sammy Hagar's lyrics got really, really deep on this album. And Sammy, he gets a lot of flack for his lyrics, but if you go back to Mine All Mine from OU812, that's a little bit that was a little signal that there's more into this guy than tequila and chicks and driving fast. Yeah.
Yeah, and along with the darker lyrics, like we didn't know. I don't think people knew that there was tension in the band yet. That was a private thing, but I think it did get expressed through this album.
Yeah.
Little did we know that it would get worse after for within the band, the tension.
Yeah, I knew that their manager Ed Leffler had died, but what I didn't know is how many problems that caused.
Yeah.
Within the whole, within the balance of the group. That's part of the. Yeah.
In 5150, Love was walking in, but on balance, Love had walked out.
Don't tell me what Love can do. And now I'm living with the aftershock, and it's not enough. So one thing, the first thing that obviously that was readily available was the CD. Now this album cover is one that the Instagram police will if the wrong person sees it, anyway, there's nothing vulgar on the album cover, but whatever. So you can already tell this is not a party album. And the band looks more serious than they ever had before. I always like this, the egg there, and I always like the design on the disc itself, the Da Vinci, thing.
Yeah.
And the title, I mean, you could look at the cover as saying it's about finding balance, but there's Siamese twins on the cover. There's brothers in Van Halen, so even the inner sleeve. Obviously, by the mid '90s, grunge had taken over, and it was just not. You weren't going to get anywhere with, Summer Nights and
No.
And I think this album was a good response to it. It sounds like Van Halen. Sonically, I don't think it sounds all that different than For an Awful Carnal Knowledge. Even though this is the one and only time they worked with the late Bruce Fairbairn. That's really one of the first times they worked with a dedicated outside producer besides the usual team of Ted Templeman and I guess Andy Johns produced the previous album, but it definitely sounds like Van Halen. There's no mistaking it. But lyrically, once you get into it, it is a little bit different. I mean, even the song title, The Seventh Seal.
It's basically apocalyptic.
Aftershock. Take Me Back, Deja Vu, Feeling. It's, it is a deeper album. Actually, and one of the cool things I remember after it had been out for a week or so, I remember finding this. And this was at a time when new vinyl did not come out in North America. It was really a novelty, and it was only the biggest of bands. I think Pearl Jam had put a couple of their albums out on vinyl. I think the Tragically Hip put out one of their albums on vinyl. So when I saw this, I bought it right away. Yeah. Still haven't opened it. Apparently, according to Discogs, this is one of the most valuable albums in my collection. But yeah, it was a number one album. It went on to sell 3 million copies, which I was very happy about because this was an era where a lot of my favorite bands were just going by the wayside commercially.
Yeah, that was an interesting era, like you hinted at there, especially with the grunge part. That is a good point. That was that dark tone was sort of had sort of set the whole industry.
Yeah, it was a complete shift
tone, right? So they were adapting. It was also that there was tension in the band.
Yeah,
it's reflected in the lyrics. It's reflected in the the crunchy guitar tones. It's a little bit kind of there's some heavier sounding riffs in there. And then even the album art is got sort of that brown, dark, like apocalyptic sky in the background.
Yeah, it's really striking. This is
when people call it a darker album, there's numerous reasons for that.
Yeah,
it creates magic in this album. This album, if you're not a fan of this album or you haven't really given it a lot of time, it might grow on you. That's what happened with me. It didn't take long. It grew on me quickly. I really like this. There's some very good quality Van Halen work in this album.
So Don't Tell Me was the first single, and that was not going to be a big hit because it was a big mainstream rock hit, but it was never going to be a big pop single because it is so dark and it is heavy, and it's one of my favorite Van Halen songs, and it's one of my favorite Eddie Van Halen moments because it's not particularly virtuistic, but just that part at the end solo where he's just leaning on that one meow 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 which is a very poor recreation of it I just did, but you know the part I mean if you know the song. Gets me every time. I love that end solo. But the biggest hit from this album, and it's one of the handful of CD singles I have, is Can't Stop Loving You, which is very pop. It's one song that wouldn't have sounded out of place on really any of the previous Van Halen albums with Sammy. I got this because at the time, it contained something that was not on the album, which is the song Crossing Over. Van Halen were never a band that did a lot of B-sides, that had a lot of songs that were different than like not live versions or edits or whatever. Crossing Over is a totally complete different song, and I think it was written in like 83, 84, and Eddie wrote it about a friend of his that had committed suicide, and but Sammy ended up writing the lyrics. So it was a little bit about that, but it was also about their manager, Ed Loeffler, who had been Sammy's manager as a solo artist, ended up managing Van Halen, and he died sometime in 94. And the band was never quite the same after that. And I guess I'll skip ahead to the other versions, but what Chad was referring to earlier too, so this, it came out early in the year. Like when I think of when this album first came out, I think of winter. I think of lots of snow and cold, and it just kind of, it's not a summery album the way that really their previous three were. I think of 5150, Oh We Wait 1-2, and For Love, Kernel Knowledge. Those are summer albums to me, especially Oh You Wait 1-2 and For Love, Kernel Knowledge, because they both came out right at the beginning of the summer, the years that they came out. So I think of listening to them in the summer. This is very much a winter album, which again speaks to that darkness. Like it wouldn't have made any sense if this had come out in the summer of 94.
No.
I mean, it would have been great, but it just, it just things kind of fell into place. But yeah, another thing that fell into place is that Van Halen went on a pretty extensive tour, and it took them to Old Orchard Beach, which was probably a 4-hour drive away from where I lived and where Chad grew up.
Yeah.
So when I found out that they were coming, I remember it was like automatic. I called up all my buddies and said, "Hey, do you want to go?" There ended up being 6 of us going. And I'm so glad Chad decided to go. I'm so glad that they came to Old Orchard Beach, because it's the only time that I got to see Van Halen in any incarnation. It's the only time I've seen Sammy in any incarnation. And especially after, when Eddie died in 2020, I mean, Neil Peart had passed away earlier that year, and I'm like, I wished I'd seen Rush and Van Halen more, but at least I got to see them once.
It was amazing. I had no idea what I was in for. I just didn't know, and so I remember we were standing in line. I remember the Old Orchard Beach concert was at a baseball stadium. Yeah. Old Orchard Beach is a kind of a summery. It's a beach town.
It's a resort town.
It's a tourist. It shrinks in the wintertime, and in the summertime it's very
tourist trap.
It's very busy. But it was outdoors at a baseball stadium. I remember we got there early as we could. And we were standing in long lineup to get in through the gates, and I heard this guitar. And it was sound check. I didn't know what a sound check was.
It was probably Eddie doing one of his. It was like one of his horse or his elephant sounds that he would do with the whammy bar.
I think so. Yep.
And then I also remember hearing Sammy and going, "Whoa!" Yeah. And I'm like, oh yeah. I think they actually played the Seventh Seal. They actually sound checked with that song. So
yeah,
this is great.
We got a little taste. We're outside of it. We can't see anything. It's not the best quality of sound because it's behind basically the wall of the stadium, but it's outdoors. So we hear this and I'm like, wow, that was really cool. And then they're like, yeah, they're playing that. That's sound check. I'm like, what is sound? I had no idea.
Just making sure the levels
that was a little taste. And then we get in there, and of course it's people aren't piled in yet because it's the opener, and
that's another story.
Well, so I ended up.
We have differing opinions on the whole opening situation. I'll let Chad explain.
Well, okay, I'm not going to get into it because it's a diversion, but it was Our Lady Peace that opened for them. It was apparently supposed to be Skid Row. There was a lot of disappointment that it was not.
This was something that I was not aware of because I did not know who was opening for them.
Yeah.
We got there and there were Skid Row posters everywhere with Subhuman Race, the album that they were out with, which was actually for them was a very dark album and a very heavy album. But it also said Skid Row will not be appearing, so it was like this. Oh, I wish they'd taken down the posters kind of thing, and it's funny because this was the last tour they did with Sammy, except for the one they did in 2004, and that was the very last tour they did with Sebastian Bach, which to this date I don't know if that's ever going to reconcile. And and as I've said many times, I was not a grunge fan and I was not an alt rock fan. So Our Lady Peace to me was not an equal replacement.
And that feeling was widespread in the venue. You could tell that there were a lot of Van Halen fans in there that were really let down and maybe disgusted and totally uninterested in Our Lady Peace. And Our Lady Peace was, definitely, it was a Canadian at all. Here we are, we're in the U.S. and it's a Canadian grunge band.
They were just starting to break. They had already broken in Canada, but like a lot of Canadian bands, in a couple of years, they did have some success in the States, but not yet.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with an opening act sound quality.
Well,
so it's...
yeah. But you know what's funny? I liked it. I thought it was great. I was like, I like these guys. Of course, if you hear something live, sometimes it's it's more appealing, right? So, but I didn't realize they had small amplifiers and the small drum kit all in front of the Van Halen gear. I didn't know any of this. I had no idea.
Like enough room from us to the camera to the stage, right? And the big curtain behind them.
To me, it sounded good. It was loud enough and it was live. And I didn't mind their songs. I was like, I could get into this. And I kind of did. I do have some Our Lady Peace stuff. I like it. I don't listen to it a lot nowadays. It hasn't really stuck with me or aged that greatly, but it was okay at the time. I kind of liked it, and it was live. It was cool. But then Van Halen came out, and it just blew me right over. It was this 10 times the sound. It was the clarity of the sound.
I remember distinctly. All of a sudden, there was no big fanfare. Yeah. There was no curtain drop. It's just there they were. They walked out on stage. And the first song they did was Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do. But what I remember is that for the first few lines, Sammy was so out of tune. And I'm guessing he couldn't hear himself in the monitors because it got fixed really quickly. And then it was off to the races. And I mean, it was a fantastic fantastic
I was
show.
instantly hooked. That was my very first. So this tour was my first real rock concert experience. I had seen other little concerts or little live acts or whatever here and there, but not arena style. Like,
it was the first time I'd been in like a sea of people. You know what I mean? Like it was. I think it might have been. Yeah, it was the first outdoor show I was ever to. And to be honest, it was probably my first 5 or so shows that I'd been to. I didn't have a lot of concert experience, but yeah, for a very first one,
unbelievable.
And they did a lot of songs from Balance. One thing that they did, and I don't know if they started it on that tour, but I thought it was the coolest thing because I didn't know that. Okay, well, I always knew Mike Anthony could sing. I'd never really heard Eddie sing before, but when they did Why Can't This Be Love, which is one of my favorite songs of all time, Mike starts to sing the second verse, and then Eddie takes over that second half of the verse, and it was like, yes, like just when you thought it couldn't get any cooler, it gets cooler. Well, and just to see, there they are. There's Eddie, there's Sammy. It's like it was mind blowing, and it was.
They played all the classic hits. They played a lot of material off, the Balance album. They played all of the things you would expect. Yeah,
and not a lot of David Lee Roth stuff, but I never thought that sounded. No. I never thought Sammy sounded good singing that anymore. That was stuff was made for Dave. They did do a couple. I think they did. They did like Ain't Talking About Love. I think, and maybe You Really Got Me.
They did Panama. I remember that. It was good. It was enough for me. I really appreciate the David Lee Roth era. It's great, but I honestly really feel maybe more close to the Hagar.
I think material. That you and I are about the same. We both kind of got on board with Van Halen with 5150.
I did. That's when I was introduced to it. That's when I first started. I was maybe 12 when that came out, and that was my initial experience with them. I got the David Lee Roth stuff later. Yeah. I like it.
It's different. It's a different band.
But I like the freshness of the Hagar area personally. But this album was great. They played all of those things. I was blown away. I had never been to a concert, of course, so I didn't know about the bass solo. I didn't know about the drum solo. Yeah. That was just icing on the cake, so to speak, because they played the songs. I'm like, I can listen. I was familiar with the songs, but I didn't know I was going to get a drum solo. I didn't know I was going to get a bass solo. I didn't know Sammy at the end of the concert. Okay, first of all, before that, Sammy was so full of energy. Yeah. He was hopping around the stage. He was wearing, people were throwing bras and panties up there. He was wearing them on his head.
Our buddy Bob.
It was fantastic.
At one point, Sammy wore Bob's hat.
Yeah.
Because
Oh, yeah.
I remember, because the three of it, there's you and me and John were back because we were just getting we didn't want to get crushed. The other guys, Bob and Dwayne and Brent, went up front.
Yeah.
Bob had thrown his hat on stage, and I didn't know this until the end of the show. We met back up at the parking lot. Sammy Hagar wore my hat.
Yeah. So if there was tension in the band, we did not know.
We didn't know it.
You could not tell. They were so full of energy.
You would know less than a year later, it all fell apart.
These guys were on fire. They were magnificent.
Yeah.
And at the end, basically at the end, the encore was, if I remember right, Sammy came out with an acoustic guitar. I didn't know about Sammy's solo past.
Oh yeah, he did Eagles Fly.
Yeah. So that was another treat for me. So
Yeah.
he played Where Eagles.
And then
When Eagles Fly or Where
it's
Eagles
just it's Where, but the song's just called Eagles Fly.
Yeah. So
but then Eddie comes out with the whew, 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 and they go into Pound Cake. To see that live, I mean, that For Love Carnal Knowledge is still my favorite Van Halen album, but this one's good. I mean, I think they're all really good.
So the concert was just stunning. It was just phenomenal.
You've seen me show this before on the shows. I bought the tour book. I had to. Bought a shirt. We both got shirts. They're both gone. The ravages of time. But yeah, I mean, this is the first tour book I ever bought with a website on it. And I doubt this website works anymore, but the Van Halen universe probably took an hour to connect.
Is it 95?
Yeah.
So
this is early days, right?
95, the internet, for any youngins out there, it was not commercialized yet.
Probably took you about an hour to get in, and you heard like...
yeah, so it was dial up. There were websites, definitely.
Yeah.
A lot of it was fan-based material.
Yeah.
Corporate, sort of business-style websites, they were... I'm not going to say they didn't exist, but they were in their infancy.
So this website, as it was back then, is vanhalen.warner... Well, it's supposed to be records. So warnerrcrds.com/balance.
Oh, yeah, that's
See it all on the internet. One thing that always bothered me about this, and it's my OCD, but the albums, the Dave albums are in the right order, but the Sammy ones aren't. They've got it should be these two and then these two anyway. But yeah, but no, it was. I remember I was a huge Van Halen fan anyway, and that just kind of. It was just like, yeah, they were, of course they were great. Like, I wasn't expecting any different. No. But I guess because it was such confusion, like you were just moving back to the area, we didn't really talk that much about, it didn't even occur to me. Oh, by the way, Alex will do a drum solo. Mikey will do a bass solo. Of course, Eddie will come out for his guitar solo. Sammy will do a couple of acoustic solos. They also did, as a whole band, they did There's Only One Way to Rock. So that was another one of Sammy's solo songs. His guitar messed up. He said, my one chance to blow Eddie off the stage.
Yeah. So, I mean, I shouldn't say it wasn't that I had never heard of drum solos or bass solos. We watched concerts on video.
Never seen
We watched concerts on video from different bands. I had never watched a Van Halen concert on a video, and I just didn't think or have a certain expectation. So it was a really great surprise. Alex is a fantastic drummer. I think every Van Halen fan knows that, but he sometimes gets outshined.
And he's one of the most unique. Like all you need to hear is one of his drum tracks, and it's Alex.
Oh,
It's got such a unique sound.
And Mike on the bass. I mean, that guy is
his background vocals are so vital to the Van Halen sound.
Yeah, it was stunning. So as you can tell, I'm still enthusiastic about the whole thing.
So I'm trying to think they did. They sound checked with Seventh Seal. I can't remember if they actually did that at the show. I can't remember if they did that during the show or not. They probably did. I know they did Don't Tell Me because they opened with that. They did Not Enough, the ballad. I think they might have done Big Fat Money. It's funny because I hadn't gotten to the point where I started writing down the set list because at that time, what am I going to do with this?
No.
There was I had no,
It was a generous set. It was, they didn't cut it short. It went on. It was great. And the Sammy solo material at the end with the acoustic guitar, I remember he just sat down on the stage with his legs draped over the side.
Yeah.
And he was so comfortable. And, he was enjoying his time. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes with the band, but
they gave their all for the crowd, for the audience.
Excellent.
Another thing I remember too, to talk about Mike Anthony's background vocals, and again, they probably did this every show, but they did Dreams, and we'll get higher and higher. Mike would take the second and higher, because that's literally such a high song to sing. So it gave Sammy a little break. But I mean, it was great. I mean, it was
energetic. It was positive and upbeat. It was, it was real live.
Yeah, warts and all.
Authentic stuff.
Because like I said, when they first came on stage, like Sammy was obviously not hearing his monitor because he was singing in a different key than the rest of the band was playing. But that was, I've never seen a band go on stage like that. Just boom. First you hear bum 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 bum, like, so Eddie walks on stage playing, and then Sammy's right behind him, and then there was no big build up to it. There was no ladies and gentlemen Van Halen. It was just, here they are. I'd never seen a band go on stage like that, and it was almost jarring, because it was like, oh, now you probably didn't think anything of it. I'm like, that is not normally how shows start. There's normally a big build up, big anticipation, the curtain drops. But that was just a very low key intro. It's just like, we don't need a big intro. We're Van Halen.
And so from that point, I went on to see a few rock concerts after that. Now, mind you, like, still not as many as a lot of other people have seen, but I've seen Iron Maiden a couple times. I went to Guns N' Roses.
So Rush.
Yeah. Rush is my favorite. This might be my second favorite. The Balance Tour, Van Halen, the Van Halen lineup with Sammy. I think that might be my second favorite concert ever. It was really good.
Yeah. So we're just over 30 years since that happened. It was August. Pretty sure it was August. Well, let me check. Shameless plug.
You have the ticket somewhere. I know you
I've got the ticket stub on my wall over there, but I've also got a print of it in my Sammy Hagar book that I'm black.
Oh, that's convenient.
So I did, I wanted to make sure when in the Van Halen chapter.
There it is.
Yeah, it was August 6, 1995. And there it is. That's what and let's see, what was the price? $34. 34 US dollars. So you couldn't get a keychain for that now at a merch booth.
We should have gone twice.
Yeah, it was amazing. So that was it. That was the Balance tour, the Balance era, and then sadly it all fell apart the next year. But hey, so the only other things to get into, like, so in 2023, Warner Brothers put out the box set that had all of the Hagar era CDs. So this is the version of Balance that came with that. It's just in the cardboard sleeve, and it does a pretty good job of recreating the inner sleeve. Although, try and read those lyrics.
That's awesome. Yeah. Pretty fine print.
And now, in 2025, we have the remastered version. Now, I just stuck the hype sticker over here so the Instagram police don't come after me. This, of course, is available in deluxe editions. I've just got the CD. So what this has with it, the first CD has the original album, and I'm really glad to see that they restored the instrumental. I always get this wrong, Baluchitherium, to the proper running order. But CD2 has some rarities on it. So it's got Crossing Over, like I mentioned before, the B-side from Can't Stop Loving You. Then it's got the two songs that they did for the Twister soundtrack right as they were breaking up, Humans Being, and then the instrumental Respect the Wind. And then it's got some live tracks from Wembley Stadium, June 24th, 1995. So less than 2 months before we saw them. And I would imagine this is a similar, it's not the full show, but they do the Seventh Seal, Feelin', Ain't Talking About Love, guitar solo, You Really Got Me, When It's Love, Jumpin' Right Now. I don't know why they didn't put the full concert out. And the other thing, I'm confused, and a lot of folks have already talked about this too. They actually filmed a show in Toronto, and they did it as a pay-per-view, because I remember Much Music showed it a few times of them playing in Toronto. I don't know why they didn't put that out, because that was professionally shot. Maybe they will. Maybe they're planning a live in Toronto release like they did with the Dallas one. But it's worth getting the expanded edition, because you've got those live tracks, and like I said, there's vinyl box sets of it. I don't know what more to say. I think it's weird, because it's the one Van Halen album. I mean, for a few years after that, I used to see the CD used all the time. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. It just didn't seem to have the staying power, but I think it's held up extremely well. I think it makes more sense listening to it now that you know what the story is behind what was going on in the band, and just now that much more life has passed, I can relate to some of these lyrics more. I mean, Aftershock is about is about Sammy getting divorced. Well, I had no experience with that in 1995. Fun things like that, right? And
That's right.
And it's just really good. I mean, there's people that just don't like this era, and that's fine. But for people that do, it's worth picking up this edition. Anything else you wanted to add about, just the Balance era in general?
I want to just say how much I really love the piano intro on Not Enough. I think that hooked me into the whole album. For me, I'm a sucker for melody and the softer side. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the heavy stuff too, but that kind of hooked me in. I give the rest of the album a good listen through, and it took me maybe a couple listens to the whole album to really let it sink in. It's there's more to digest in this than there is in some of their previous stuff.
It's probably not as instantly accessible.
Yeah, so if you haven't listened to this in a while or ever, give it another try. I'm telling you, it's really good quality stuff.
It does reward with multiple listings. So
yeah.
So there you go. That's our episode on the Balance album, the Balance tour, and the 30th anniversary. Hard to believe, 30 years, 1995. And of course, I'll have the link to this below. But yes, if you're interested in delving deeper into Sammy Hagar's solo career, this is a good companion. Shameless plug. I'll have the link to this below. And Chad, thanks for sitting in. This worked out really well.
Yes.
And we'll do it again next time he's through. Thanks for watching this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Go listen to some Van Halen.